So good afternoon here in Arizona. My name is Josie Jen Morgan. I'm the coordinator of the Pre-Health Professions program here at the University of Arizona. And with me, I have two of my academic advisors in pre-health. I have Ethan Bull, and then we have Nidhi Gupta. And then we have a whole group of pre-health ambassadors. We have 8 pre-health ambassadors that actually help us with this signature program and other outreach events. And so we are advertising right now to look to fulfill 3 or 4 slots for pre-health ambassadors. Our current ambassadors are actually the selection committee. They will review all applications, and then those that are selected for a multiple mini interview, we will be doing that virtually. And they are the admissions committee. They will select our next 3 or 4 new ambassadors. So we're real excited. So if you're interested in doing something like that, we'd love to have you engaged in our office. We're in the Bartlett Academic Success Center, right behind Bear Down Gym. We're on the 4th floor, so do come in and see us. But definitely, touch base with us if you haven't. Also, as a note, for today's attendance, for all students who attend today, in any of the panels that we have going on, and we'll have panels go all the way up until 6 p.m., is that we're going to be doing a drawing for a package, Mcat package of prep materials valued at about $500. But if you're interested in another profession, let's say dentistry, optometry, pharmacy, we also have those materials. So if you are selected, we will make sure you get those review materials. But today's panel actually is going to be our out-of-state medical school admissions panel. And what's the beauty of this particular panel is that the folks that are represented on our panel today, many of our U of A students have applied to their programs. And so we have students get into their programs. So we have this kind of top 10 list of schools that our students get into. And so we were able to get these individuals from their schools so that they can provide you information, because there's a reason why Arizona students are getting into their programs. So that's really the beauty of this particular panel. So beyond behalf of the University of Arizona, the A Center, and the Pre-Health Professions Advising Program, and our pre-health ambassadors, I want to welcome you today, and this should be a wonderful session. We have quite a few individuals that are sitting in on this session. If you know folks that were unable to attend, we will have a recording of this onto our website. So what's going to happen from here on is I'm going to pass this on to our pre-health ambassadors, and we have Matthew and Lady who are actually going to be facilitating today. So before we move on, we're going to have Matthew read our land acknowledgement. And then after that, Lady will then go ahead and have the panels introduce themselves. And then Matthew will throw out the first question into the panel, and then we'll bring it to closure closer to about noon. So I'm going to hand it over to Matthew.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Evangelista, and I go by he, him pronouns. And I'm a junior studying physiology and medical sciences. And I am one of the 2 pre-health ambassadors in this panel that are going to be facilitating it today. And I'm going to pass it off to Lady to introduce herself before we get into the land acknowledgement.
Hi, everyone. Good morning from the University of Arizona. My name is Lady. I'm, again, one of the 2 pre-health ambassadors leading this panel. My pronouns are she or hers. I'm currently a 3rd-year undergraduate, so a junior studying public health here at the U of A.
All right, thank you, Lady. So before we begin, we would like to recognize that we respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Uram and Yaqui tribes. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through the education offerings, partnerships, and community service. And I'll pass it on to Lady.
Thank you so much, Matthew. So now we would like to take the time for our panelists to introduce themselves. So each panelist, please unmute yourself and feel free to introduce yourself to the group. Whoever would like to start first.
My name is Tanisha Price Johnson. I'm the Associate Dean, Student Affairs at Keck Medicine of USC. Spent lots of time at the University of Arizona. I'm very happy to be here.
My name is Becky Weeks. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Assistant Director of Admissions at the University of Michigan Medical School. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. My name is Agasia Lanier, and I'm an admissions counselor with Kaiser Permanente, Bernard J. Tyson School of Medicine, and I'm happy to be here as well.
I'm going to
Go
jump
ahead.
in, going with the LA theme. I'm Dr. Jennifer Lucero. I am the Associate Dean of Admissions for the David Geffen School of Medicine. I am also a practicing physician and practice obstetric anesthesia.
Morning, everybody. My name is Christopher de la Cerda. I'm the Recruitment and Student Life Manager in the Office of Recruitment and Multicultural Affairs at Harvard Medical School. Pleasure to see everybody here.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Christian Espin. I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at the Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in tropical Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, go ahead, Karina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Goodwin. I am the Director of Admissions for the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here.
Then finally, I'm Amy Ahern. I'm the Assistant Director of MD Admissions at the University of Iowa, and I hope you can't see the snow behind me, but we have snow here, so I'll keep that in the down low. I miss going to this event in Arizona about this time of the year. Thanks for having me.
All right, perfect. Was that everyone? All right, so thank you for introducing yourselves. It was nice getting to know more about where you are from. And to start with our first question, a little more general, what does your selection process look like for your school?
I'm happy to start. I think, and I'm kind of interpreting the question. I think we probably all would say that the process that we use it's a holistic review. So it means that we actually look at the full candidate, their experiences, their lived experiences, sort of what they've done, their dedication to their communities, dedication to working. Obviously, we have our mission-driven focuses. So, what each candidate brings and what their interest is for each of the missions that we have. And one candidate doesn't have to have every single thing. Obviously, we want a diverse group, diverse interest, diverse focus. So the process really kind of models that, what I think the AAMC talks about with the holistic review.
I think the only piece to add to that, thank you, Jennifer, I kind of took, I think, most of how I'd answer that. I think the piece sort of structurally to consider, at least for HMS, is if you're submitting your application on time and it's complete, a human will read the thing. So thinking about what part of holistic does mean, and that's what that looks like. There aren't any cutoffs for scores. Certainly, it doesn't mean that you can have any score in any GPA and you're automatically get in or not, but just know that we know GPAs and Mcat scores. You've probably, especially if you're applying, you've probably looked at all of our websites and others, and some of you are even so organized you probably have spreadsheets of what are the averages of matriculating students. Like, I know it's all there, it's okay, and I know those numbers can be scary, but that's where, in terms of thinking about what does holistic at least mean for HMS, is that humans are reading the entire thing. So we can also understand the context of what do those MCAT scores and GPAs look like, and who are you, and really, and this builds on everything that my colleague Jennifer mentioned about the process as a whole and kind of how to think about holistic.
I agree, Chris, that I was going to mention, I know sometimes I hear applicants get frustrated when they see everybody says we holistic review and it sounds very vague. And because I know applicants want to know, like, what do I need to do? What do you want to see? And it's different for everybody, very much like Dr. Lucero was saying, that we try to put everything into context, your story, your background, what's brought you to this point. And the GPAs and MCATs kind of color those things for us, along with your experiences and activities. But when we get thousands, literally thousands of applications for sometimes 100 spots, or just a little bit over 100 spots, or sometimes less than 100 spots, you got to draw the line somewhere. We don't have thousands of interview spots for the thousands of applicants that we have. So I get it. It can be frustrating sometimes, but like Chris said, we do read all, people are reading these applications. They're not always easy decisions to make. And so there are very few slam dunks in this process. So I would encourage you to look at school-specific websites, and many of them will describe what their holistic review process looks like. And then, try to, it's hard. I think you're trying to be everything to everybody. And so try to craft an application that, you're trying to put your best foot forward, and see how things flush out.
I would just add to that too, that holistic review takes time.
Yeah.
So the key attribute that you want to possess is among others is patience, because we could all literally just throw up the applications, let them land on the floor, whatever in front of us, and we take it and run. But I think the essence of holistic review is because we really need to dig deeper and understand who you are. So just make sure you understand it. It's a marathon, not a short sprint. And so just have that patience when you're going through this process.
Great at CU School of Medicine. We do all of the things that have been talked about. I just got an email today from an applicant that was like, can I please have some feedback on what I can do? I got a 521 and a 4.0 GPA, and like, because it's holistic, right? That doesn't necessarily guarantee admission. So I encourage you to make sure you put together a very broad application, really highlighting experiences that you've done and what you've actually gained out of that. Not just like, I did 75,000 hours of shadowing. Like, what did you learn from that? And how did it change you? And how did it guide you towards medicine, right? So we really look to that of not just the experiences that you've done, but how they changed you or guided you on your journey to medicine. The only other thing I would also add is, I'm not sure if any other schools here utilize Casper and the Altus suite, but at CU School of Medicine, that is another piece of the application is we ask all of our applicants to complete Casper and a couple of other of the situational based judgment tools that are provided there. And so that's just another tool that goes into holistic review. It really gets at those like intangible attributes that you can't really get from a paper application, looking at morals and ethics and things that aren't medically related at all, but how would you react or act in a certain situation? So nothing you can really study for. There's no, medical questions on there. It's just another tool to really get at some of those attributes and competencies that are really important, that aren't, your Mcat or your GPA. Another tool that we use.
I wanted to add, I think one of the things that, and we've all sort of been saying, a little bit of this is this, students always are asking, and I run the pipeline and outreach program. So I actually advise a lot of the students that are in these pathway programs. We get really focused on the metrics that we're thinking, GPA, Mcat, looking at these, trying to figure out and comparing, as others of my colleagues have said, looking at the averages of each of these schools. The really important thing, and I think why we keep emphasizing the holistic review, is that each of you have a journey, and why medicine for you, and what you want to do with medicine, and why you have become interested in medicine. And really think about, as you're looking at your application, you are not going to be all things to all of every place. There's going to be a place that is going to fit your journey and what you want to do with it. And, obviously you want to apply broadly, but really think about, what is it about being a physician? What do you want to do? And what is part of your journey, sort of where you're at now, because it's a continuum. Getting into medical school is not the end. That is part of your journey. It's one stop, because then you're going to go on and do residency, and your journey is going to continue. And then you're going to be a physician and where you practice in the community that you serve. That's really what you need to convey to us. You may not, you may think you want to do one specialty, and you decide along that journey that you want to do another. And I always use myself as an example. I was going to do primary care. I ended up doing both obstetrics and gynecology, practiced for 2 years, and then went back and did anesthesia and did obstetric anesthesia. But my journey always was about working with my community, being part of, the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion is so important to me and so critical as being part of an underserved and underrepresented communities. So I continued that journey. I may have done different things that I didn't think I was going to do, but that, passion and what I was interested in and what drove me to medicine is still continued. Convey that to us. Do the things that you are passionate about. That will come through in your application. It will come through in your interviews, and it will allow us to really advocate for, and finding the places that fit that mission, where to apply. So just wanted to add a little bit to that.
I'm going to chime in real quickly. We had another panelist join us. And so I'm going to have Patricia introduce herself from Mayo.
Hi, good morning. My name is Patricia Rodriguez, and I am the admissions coordinator for Mayo Clinic Alex School of Medicine. We do have 3 campuses. I'm here based in Arizona, but we also have a campus in Minnesota, as well as programs in Florida. Anything else you'd like me to add at this point?
No, I think that's good. Just chime in when the questions come up.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions as far as from our ambassadors?
No follow-up questions for me, but Patricia, I know you just recently joined us, but would you be able to answer the first question that we posed to our panelists? What does your selection process look like?
Certainly. So for our selection process, we do consider one of the first criteria would be the Mcat application score for that. We are looking for a score of 508, which is generally about in the 75th percentile. From then on, we do then consider applications and do a holistic review of them. So we do consider everything that the student has included, their experiences, personal statement, and all that they might bring to their application. So that's basically what we will consider and look for in our applicants. We're looking for students who are really wanting to, go back to the community and provide service. That is something that is one of the Mayo values. So we look for that experience for that applicants who have come with some of that experience already.
Thank you so much for all of your responses and for letting us know a little bit more about your selection process and a holistic view of that. So I will proceed on to the second question that we have. And for accessibility purposes, I will put that in the chat. So our second question is, what advice would you give to a student considering your school? Again, the question is, what advice would you give to a student considering your school? Anyone can start.
Hello. Since I was pretty quiet on the last question, I think everybody just, said pretty much what I would normally say as well. But what advice I would give to a student considering my school, or any school for that matter, is always look at the mission and vision of each school that you're considering. That's going to give you a pretty good idea of what type of student that school is looking for. That's pretty much my biggest advice, and I share that to every single person that I meet.
I would also jump onto that and say, think about your learning environment. Think about how you work in teams, how you motivate yourself, and also take a look at the various websites and see what the curriculum is like, because many medical schools are moving to the accelerated preclinical curriculum. So take a look at what that looks like and how you enter into your clinical phase. Also think about or explore how students set up their dedicated study time for step 1. So all of those aspects play into how you are moving forward with becoming a physician and what works best for you.
One other thing I would add is that if you're really serious about moving all the way to Iowa from Arizona, is that I would encourage you to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat at the end, but I think that will help you get further information, and I can ask you further questions to see again if you're really a good fit to move across the country somewhere like Iowa, which is a great place. But there's a lot of things that go into that, especially if you'd be moving away from your family and things like that. So I could put you in touch with a student who has successfully done that before from Arizona. And I think that's part of doing your research, and the other things that people have mentioned previously is reaching out to people if appropriate and getting some good answers to why would I really consider going to X school.
I
Yeah,
would also,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Karina.
I was just gonna add to what Amy was talking about, especially, when you're interviewing at all, different schools, we always encourage our students to have all of the feels during your interview day and to make sure that you're asking the really hard questions that are really important to you. Like, right, can you handle -5-degree temperature? Maybe not, and that's okay. It should be, right? It needs to be an experience that you're going to thrive in, not that you just were accepted into. So we always want people to ask those really hard questions around things that are really important to them, because the last thing we want is for you to arrive onto our campus and then not be able to thrive and not be able to succeed. So we want you to ask those hard questions to our faculty, ask those hard questions to our students to really make sure that Colorado is a place that you want to be at. We'll have the opportunity to get to know you throughout our interview process, right? So we want to make sure that you take the opportunity to really so you can get to know us too. So don't be afraid to ask those hard questions, because they're important, and so they're important to us too.
I agree with Karina and the other panelists. You're going to get a great medical education wherever you go to medical school. So you really have to think about what is the best fit for you. Where are you going to learn best? In what type of environment? What is the student culture like? Are the people that you meet and talk to people who you can, take this journey with, the other people interviewing there? Really get a feel for what that culture is like, and what the style of curriculum is like, and whether or not you feel like that is going to give you the best chance for success. But you are going to get a great medical education wherever you go. So you're looking at those other factors that are going to add to your own experience, help you to become the physician that you hope to become, and then making a choice based on that.
I'd like to piggyback off what Becky said too, and everybody else. I think you're hearing kind of generally what advice from us, and I recognize that oftentimes applicants are like, look, I just want to get in, and then I'll make the fit happen. And I've seen applicants over the years, a small group, but like some people who get accepted to a medical school, and the more they learned about it, they're like, I don't know if this is for me. And then they decline their acceptance, like the one they got, and they decide to put themselves in the application pool the following year to go through that whole process again. And boy, I think they'd really wish that they would have done more homework on the front end. And we're talking about a really small percentage, but they've done more homework on the front end to figure out, I remember talking to a guy, he's like, I just felt like the curriculum wasn't for me. Like, well, didn't you know what the curriculum was like prior to accepting the interview and going through that process? So we get it. You just want to get in. It's really hard to get in the medical school, but do your homework, and you can do that through the MSAR, which is the Medical School Requirements Guide. And we all have YouTube videos, and you'll find, we all have shiny websites and stuff. So, go do your homework, do some shopping, do some browsing. And I think you'll find that we all deliver the information similarly. It's the way we package it and deliver it that makes us all a little bit unique in different ways.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Is there anyone else that would like to add on anything to that specific question before we move on?
I do have a follow-up to something that Christian just mentioned. And I think it's especially important now that many schools, have transitioned to virtual interviews. You may have in your mind what the best fit school is for you, or your dream school, and you may interview there, get accepted there. it might not actually be the best fit for you. So if you don't have to spend money to travel to other schools, I would caution you maybe not to cancel other interviews because you think you got into that dream school for you. You might find your true love somewhere else along the interview trail. So just food for thought.
All right, thank you for all that insight. Moving
Can I
on to the
add
next.
one more thing to that? Oh,
Yes, go ahead.
And if you are interviewing virtually, which I know a lot of people probably have in the last cycle or may in the future, visit that school. Visit that school when you have a chance. Don't just go in blindly.
All right, perfect. Would anyone else like to tag along? Anything? All right, so for the next question, how are transfer students from community colleges assessed in the admissions process for your school? And if I could start with Mr. De La Cerda and move on to anyone else who wants to chime in after that.
Actually, it'll kind of connect to some of the earlier questions and what we talked about things in context. So there, I guess, a couple things to keep in mind is that being a transfer student is a unique experience that your reviewers aren't necessarily going to understand, even if they've been reviewing, files for years. If they didn't go through that experience themselves, then right, they just don't have that first-person experience. And then it, of course, depends on right what state and city are you in? Did you transfer to your state's school system, or or a private institution, or a different state system? So there's a lot of layers to keep in mind. So you'd want to figure out how do you connect those dots for people in a way that's clear and concise. And as you heard about, like high volume of applications, and we're kind of have to move quickly, even though we do try to look at the entirety of an application. There's only so much time per application. So you've really got to make sense of, in your own terms, in a lot of ways, what does it mean to be a community college transfer student, and to really pinpoint, where are the strengths in that? Because it might not feel like it, because I'm not a transfer student myself. I have a lot of friends that went to the University of California, Santa Barbara, a ton of people that transferred from the schools around Los Angeles and Southern California as a whole. The supports can be very different. That process can be really nebulous and hard to navigate. So you're quickly developing really a lot of skills in a lot of very unique ways that you might not view that way, and your reviewers won't understand them that way if you don't put it in there that way. So just like anything that's a challenge or a roadblock or a barrier, there are skills you're developing to be able to navigate all of that on your own. And often as a transfer student, you're doing a lot of things on your own, even with really high quality supports at your undergraduate institution. So make all of that clear in a way that makes sense in your application and in the context of your experience, in your journey to medicine and why you want to go to medical school. So it's got to fit into who you are, your journey, your interest in medicine, and it's just all kind of, I think, got to make sense. And then that can definitely be, I think, a strength in your application. I can say I don't think we have a huge number of transfer students in terms of like our current first year class, but it's also not necessarily something that, by the time I'm communicating with students, that comes up all the time in our conversations unless they bring it up. I don't interview students, to be really clear, so I don't see that component, so that might look a little bit different for anybody on a call here that's interviewing students. You might ask about that potentially, but again, it's part of your academic journey. Otherwise, I would say it doesn't come up a ton unless I'm talking to a student and we're sort of, they bring it up, or we're specifically looking at, a transcript for an award that we're putting them up for, something like that.
Thank you. If we can hear from Mayo Clinic next.
Oh, sorry.
And then, or you can go ahead, Dr. Lucero.
Oh, now, or do you want to hear from Mayo?
Oh, you can go first, and then we can pass it off. Yeah.
Sorry, okay. This is the challenge with Zoom. So I wanted to add, I do think it's really important for you to describe, kind of the impact and your experiences. That's actually going to go into when you think about your extracurriculars and such. But transfer students for us are absolutely not a negative. It's actually quite a positive, because it's really important for us to look at, oftentimes they are first generation. And, I myself am a first generation, and I think, navigating that pathway tells a lot about what you have to do with your perseverance, resilience, transferring in then to a four-year university. you actually have to navigate. You're now, you know, you didn't have that first 2 years. You have to really get, you know, into the mix of the current four-year university. And, you know, that is one of the areas that we like to focus on for the pipeline and outreach students, because they are coming in from a community college. They may not have their mentors set up at the institution, and you need to convey that. It's also, you know, the other part that we look at is we have the CSU, the Cal State University system, and the research experiences, they're not the same as the UCs. And we take that into account. And again, to go back to sort of what is that holistic review process, that's part of it. That's sort of looking at their journey and what were their access to resources, research, mentorship. But I would say there's just such an amazing, robust group of students that are transfer students. They come from different lived experiences. That's an incredibly positive thing for us. It's not something that we say, oh, this is a transfer student, that they get, you know, designated separately, but it comes up. It comes up in the application. Don't be shy about talking about the experiences that you have. Maybe why, if it's part of your journey, why you did, you know, community college first and then transferred in. That's all part of our review process and looking at you as a whole individual. So I think it's an incredibly positive thing. It's not something that we designate per se, and it's definitely not a negative.
I would tend to agree with just about everything you have said about in terms of not looking at it as in a different light as a student in considering your application. I worked as a transfer court specialist at one point, so transfer students have a good place in my heart. And I do think that experience does say a lot about, you know, sort of the background you might have come from or why you chose that path. And I think that you can speak to those experiences. But in terms of Mayo considering your application, what we're going to see is, you know, where did you graduate from? What university did you graduate from? We'll consider your MCAS GPA, which takes into account all the coursework that you've done. So we're not looking specifically through each and every class, you know, where did this class go? Where did you take this class in particular? But how did you do overall? So that's where that holistic review comes in. So it actually is not, you would not be considered, would not affect your application in our process, whether you had transferred from a community college. We do have a lot of students, not a lot, we do have some students who have gone that route too. So it's not it definitely would not be it negatively impact your application.
All right, at this point, do we have any other responses from our panelists or follow-up questions from anyone, follow-up responses? All right, thank you so much for your responses to those questions. We will move forward to our next question, which is, you all have probably answered this in some way, shape, or form, but it is, what makes an applicant competitive? Again, what makes an applicant competitive? And I'll put that in the chat.
Okay, I'll jump in here. Boy, that's a big question. I think we're all I think you're going to find we're all looking for a lot of similar things. And I would have to say that academics is important to us. I mean, that's our crystal ball we get to look into to try to predict, do we think you're going to be a viable medical student at our medical school? Because medical school is very difficult, and if you have a good track record, that kind of gives us an idea you're going to be successful in our programs. But other than that, I mean, I think what makes for competitive applicants is the way you write about your activities. And you'll see when you start rolling up your sleeves and getting into AMCAS, it is a beast. And if you remember doing Common Application to apply to college, it's like Common App on steroids. And so remember when you're listing all your your experiences from high school, they gave you 150 characters in Common App to write about that. Like if you were 4 years in football and 4 years in band, and 4 years, like you just got 150 characters to write about it. But now in AMCAS, you get 750 characters per each slot, plus 3 for most meaningful, which give you 1,350 more characters. These are like writing mini essays for every single activity that you've done. So it's the way you write about things, in my opinion, that bring those to life and tell us the insight, how you grew and how you were challenged. That's what brings an application to life in my experience, and lets your kind of personality and enthusiasm and passions kind of ooze out, and places that you feel you still need to grow. I don't think you're going to hear one person on here say, you have to do this one thing and that's going to get you in. Welcome to the cone of silence, you know? So there's my thoughts on that.
It's tough because that's what applicants want to hear, right? Like, what is the golden formula? And I'm so sorry, but there is totally not one. It just doesn't exist for us. So I agree totally with everything that Christian has been talking about. It's really authenticity in that application. It's really easy to sniff out the, like, this is what I'm supposed to say, so I'm going to say it. Like, you can just, especially with programs that are reading 10,000 of these, you can figure that out. So everybody's journey is going to look different. And that's really what we want to see, is your journey to medicine. How did those experiences that you've done, that you're able to now go into detail, just as Christian was talking about, how did those change you? And what impact did they have on you? And how do you want to transform that into service and impact other people, right? You just have to be totally authentic with us. And that, again, is, what we're really looking for is, why do you want to go to medical school, and what do you want to do with that, and how do you want to serve your community, or what populations do you want to serve? Or, there's no magic person that's going to become a physician, right? Medical school is hard, but like, there's a lot of doctors out there, right? So, and the formula is different for every single one of those doctors. So just be authentic. We want to, for us personally, the nitty gritty things is, we like to see some research. We like to see longitudinal experiences. We like to see some clinical stuff, so you know what you're getting into. But beyond that, like, make it your journey and make it your story, and then just tell us about it in a really authentic way. I know that that's like a bowl of soup that you're like, all right, well, let me just do that. But it's really just showing us who you are. That's really what we want to see.
I can add to a couple of things. I actually attend our admission committee meetings because I'm always looking to hear what our committee is thinking and what they're looking for in applicants. So just some common themes, or common things that I do see in the people that are admitted into our school. I basically wrote out a list because I saw the question a little earlier. So definitely looking for teamwork skills. We are looking for demonstrated leadership potential. I think that's pretty much across the board for any school. A passion for medicine and healthcare. I mean, that's a standard. And intellectual curiosity. And this is a really big one, and I don't think people really think about it, but being self-aware. We really want to see that come out in your application as well. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. And I saw there was another question. You said red flags in regards to clinical experience. For us, I think the biggest red flag in regards to clinical experience would be, if you told us in your application that you have a passion for juvenile diabetes. I'm going to look at your application and look for experiences where you volunteered, where you shadowed, anything that's going to connect me to that. If you only did 10 hours of volunteer work in regards to that, that's not going to tell me that you have a passion. So think about those things as well.
Thanks to go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say one other thing that I think really does help applicants to really kind of stand out is, and I think it's been alluded to, but it's that communication. Are you able to really tell us, not just in your application, but in your interview, because that's another really big important component of the process, who you really are? We can see on paper all the different credentials and everything that you've done, but how will you be relating to other people, other colleagues, other students, other staff, patients, whomever you might see, that you might come across. So I think that's one of those things that we may not be top of mind, but really is so critical in terms of being able to really tell us who you are and to see how you would interact with other patients and anyone else that you may come across. Can't emphasize enough that that's such an important skill to have. And we do see that. And when it comes down to choosing or looking at an applicant who may be equally, who may have similar experiences, you would want to tend to talk to the person that you think you might be able to connect with or might be able to listen to a patient better. So that's another important thing to consider, I think. And with the red flags, some of them we have already talked about, in terms of having experiences that are a little bit more longer term is also a really good thing, rather than just jumping from one experience to the other, but being really able to tell us about what some of those are. A box check, we talk about box checking where you've done what you think you need to do, but sometimes students are surprised that, I didn't really have much research experience. Well, we don't expect you to come with everything because that's part of the learning that you'll do. But just to have had that exposure and that passion for wanting to pursue this career, that's really what you want to communicate across to us.
Thank you. And I know Ms. Weeks, you can share after, but another question also popped up in the chat of how important the actual numbers are in terms of clinical hours, and is there a sweet spot that you may be looking for and when writing experiences? So Mrs. Weeks, if you want to continue that.
For Michigan, there is not a sweet spot per se. That kind of goes with there is no formula. There's no bare minimum in some area where if you do that, you're going to get into medical school. I'm sorry to share that. And burst any bubbles. Really holistic review is about looking at everything, right? You and your journey, which is going to be very different from me and my journey and anybody else. So, seeing, did you take advantage of the resources that were available to you along your journey? And so no hard and fast. We definitely want students to have exposure to research. That does not mean you have to have pipetted in a wet lab for 5,000 hours. We want you to have exposure to medicine. We don't look at quote unquote clinical hours. We want you to have exposure to the field of medicine, which can look very different for different people. That might be through volunteerism, through employment, through shadowing. A number of different ways you can get that exposure to the field of medicine, but we want you to know what it entails and still want to go into medicine. Of course, over time, expecting or hoping that you've taken some, had some more active experiences in that exposure to medicine over some passive experiences, shadowing being passive. So are you just watching or are you progressing to doing? That doesn't mean that you're practicing medicine, but are you actually doing something in those experiences? But no formula that you can fit, because you are all unique. You have unique passions, and you might choose to focus your time on some areas of passion, and then you're just kind of scratching the surface in some other areas, and that's absolutely okay. It's looking at that total package of how you spent your time and what you value. And just to kind of tack it onto the prior question as well, I encourage you all to do some self-reflection. So you do have those limited characters to describe your experiences. Don't just tell us what you did. Tell us why you did it, what you learned from it. Was it transformative? Why was it transformative? So, so many people are having very similar experiences. You can get a lot more mileage out of that entry on your application by the way that you write about it. So, Ethan and I might have done the exact same research project, the same number of hours, but if he describes it in a much more robust way and really does some self-reflection on, how that was a beneficial experience, he's going to get more credit for that experience than I would, who says, I worked in Dr. Lucero's lab for 300 hours. And I did this poster, and here's the name of the poster.
Thank you everyone for sharing. Would anyone else like to add anything to that specific question?
I'll add one more quick thing about the red flags thing. Is we're talking about hours. If you really want, if admissions really want to drill down and get to the nitty gritty, if we see like have like thousands of hours doing something, and it seems like you have 9,000 hours doing this, 6,000 hours doing that, like how can they possibly fit all this in? So it seems like they've either overestimated or embellished what they were doing or how long they were doing it. So I've had some of our admissions committee members kind of raise an eyebrow and go like, how could they have possibly been going to school and doing all these things for people listing literally thousands, if it's not like a hobby, which you may have been doing since you were 6, and then you're just kind of estimating it. But otherwise be kind of careful, because that's one of the parts of the application is that you have to estimate the number of hours you've have been doing them. So just be mindful of that. If you want to see admissions people raise an eyebrow, you don't want to go down that road.
All right, thank you. And another question came up in the chat. For reapplicants to your programs, what are ways one can relay that they are not the same applicant from the last, and aside from just the MCAT and GPA, and reapplying is a part of the journey, but doesn't need to be mentioned in the personal statement? And anyone could chime into that. And also, if you would like to answer any other common myths that you hear regarding your medical school and its process.
James, I'm happy to answer your question. For us, there's an essay or a little question that pops up if you're a reapplicant that you just can answer right there what you've done. But we'd love to see that. Like reapplicants, I love to see that. It shows resiliency. It shows that you have a never quit attitude. So I love when I see reapplicants. And yes, you can answer that question, and you have to answer that question, but I love to see it just in your personal statement or just coming up throughout your application of what you learned, what you chose to do, what experiences you decided to do within that year. I encourage so many people to look at their metrics, because it's probably not your metrics that like why you didn't get it in. It might be like if you have a lower MCAT, you can always look at retaking that or doing some post-bac work to up that GPA, but look long and hard at your application, because there's a good chance it has nothing to do with that and more to do with how you came across in your application. Was it authentic? What experiences did you do? And what do you think you could do throughout the next year, throughout the next application cycle that will make you stronger? So I always encourage people, like I said, I just got that applicant email who was rejected. It was like, I have a 521 and a 4, like, what do I need to do? And I'm like, well, I don't think you should retake the MCAT. I'm just gonna do that. So it's just really using some self-reflection and some self-awareness to go back and look at where can I be stronger? Maybe it has really nothing to do with medicine and I need to go submerge myself in a culture that I knew nothing about to have some cultural competency, right? So it can be so many different things. And it's not necessarily, it's not written down on paper anywhere of what you need to do, but you can look, internally and do some self-reflection to see what experiences you can do to better prepare yourself, not just to apply to medical school, but to be a better medical student and to be a better physician. So it's not always like, I need to go take anatomy and physiology again, but rather doing some much more personal work, perhaps.
I was going to add, I don't think we have, we actually don't have something that pops up. It's always interesting to see how, as you other programs are talking about, there's nothing that pops up that says, are you a reapplicant? But we're going to know that you're a reapplicant. And the admissions committee looks at and evaluates, okay, what did they do in that year? And I really think, really just, to echo what Karina has said, it's, sometimes it's not, and oftentimes when you look at, applications, especially if you've gotten to the point where, you know, you got a secondary or you got an interview, chances are it has nothing to do with your GPA and your MCAT. So don't look at that and just say, I actually tell we have a reapplicant program, and we look at that and I evaluate and read their applications again and sort of give them feedback. But the easiest part is just to retake the MCAT. If it was just that, right, you know, just study, retake the MCAT, you know, I mean, not that I would want to retake the MCAT. I'm sort of just saying it. That's one part of it that, you know, you're like, oh, I can, that's a fix, right? But it's often not that refix, and it's often don't spend the time focused on the MCAT. There's probably other things. So really look at the application. If you have pre-health advisors, ask them to look at it and review it and really see, you know, maybe, you know, the why medicine wasn't clear enough. Look at all the parts that you can sort of see, you know, what is it about it? And then the other thing that I would advise is if everything else looks really solid, then, you know, the next question you have to ask yourself is, what is the one part of the application that I don't see as an applicant? The letters of recommendation. So really look at that and make sure that your letter writers really are doing your application justice. They know you, they you know, and sort of think about that as well. When you put together the application for the second time, you know, again, once you've sort of looked at it, we value a reapplicant because, as Karina said, it shows your dedication, your perseverance. But you do have to think about what you're going to do in that year that you're doing the reapplication. If you're telling me that you care about working with the underserved or in particular communities, then spend that time doing that with that year. Don't go off to do something else. You know, just enrich your experiences that you have with whatever you're you know, working on in changing, or things that you think you need to change in the application. And I wouldn't ignore it in the application. Talk about it. You know, don't hide that you're a reapplicant. There's nothing to be, you know, ashamed of it or whatnot. It is very competitive, and the last 2 years have been insanely competitive. So I wouldn't think of it as a negative, but just it means that there's probably something that you need to really enhance or message better. And again, the other thing is looking at the things that you don't know about your application, like maybe the letter writers.
And I would also just quickly add that some schools will have a secondary application that will ask you if you're a reapplicant and what you did during that year. So to Dr. Lucero's point, it's really imperative to make sure you explain that in that particular section of the app.
And to the myth question that you put in there, I think two big ones that come up a lot is that every medical student and every HMS student specifically is like a multiple time published first author or something, some craziness. And I can tell you it's not the truth. It's probably not the truth from any of the medical schools here. There are certainly students that's been what they've done, and some of them are probably in our MD PhD programs, but otherwise our students have exposed themselves to research, learned a skill set, found different ways to apply it, or decided, you know what, that's not the direction I'm going to go in my academic and professional career. So, you know, I'm going to apply those skills in interesting ways, but that's not what I'm doing. So I think that's myth number one that comes up a lot. And number two is that every one of our students dedicates all 4 years of their undergraduate experience or more if they're a transfer student to getting into medical school. And I can tell you that is completely not the truth. Yes, do they keep an eye on the things that they needed to do to be able to apply? Of course they did, because if you didn't do the prerequisites before you start school, then you can't start school. If you didn't take the MCAT, you know, there's things you have to do. And they, yes, kept on top of that. But otherwise, our students have done all kinds of things, right? They've done things that, you know, on the surface, somebody might think like that has nothing to do with medicine, but it has everything to do with their personal and professional interests. It has everything to do with their interest in engaging with, you know, a community around an issue, about learning new skills, about just engaging with people, right? Medicine, you have to deal with people. So like they have experiences dealing with people in a really bad, you know, just a wide array of locations and settings and communities. So yes, our students keep an eye on getting into med school because they've decided that's one of their goals. But no, it's not the sum total of their life. So I'd really encourage you to, you know, experience those interesting things that come up. When that exciting opportunity, you know, shows up that you feel has nothing to do with medicine, but you're really excited about it, do it. Because I guarantee you in a med school interview, when somebody asks like, why'd you do, you know, insert thing, and you're like practically like vibrating in excitement and joy to talk about this thing you did for a year, number one, tone it down so that, you can be controlled and express your excitement. But that will come through really amazingly versus if you're like, and then I did 2 more years of research because I had to, right? Like that happens, all the time. And you don't want to be the person that sounds sad and depressed talking about their experiences. You want to have those things that are exciting and engaging and get your interviewer excited. Like, whoa, this person's really cool and they've done these amazing things and I want them at my medical school. So, have a life, keep an eye on medicine, and you'll be in med school, before you know it.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of this panel. But to our panelists, if you would like to provide your contact information, your email address, please feel free to put them in the chat. We would also like to take this time to thank all of our panelists for taking the time again to be part of our 2022 Virtual Health Professions Expo. So again, panelists, thank you very much for being here with us today. At this point, it's already 12 noon, so we will now have a break from 12 to 1 p.m. Our next panel will begin at 1 p.m. and the topic is gaining rural health experiences. Again, we will now have a break and we come back at 1 p.m. for the next topic, which is gaining rural health experiences. Thank you so much, panelists.
And I just want to chime in. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic panel. Oh my gosh. The other thing is it reinforces the messaging that our pre-health advisors are giving. Spot on, which is wonderful. So the information you provide to us, we relay to the students. So I hear the holistic review, be who you are on that application, be consistent, make sure that everything ties in together. And then those pre-professional core competencies that we keep beating into our students. The AAMC tells you exactly the different areas that the medical schools are looking for: teamwork, capacity for improvement, intellectual abilities. So look at those things, students. It's right there, and how you achieve them is very uniquely different. As a panelist before just mentioned, is that you could be doing the same exact activity, but what you walk away with, what you learn from it, how it impacts you, what you take away with is so uniquely different. So be the unique person. It's not a checkoff box. And we want to thank all our panelists. Any last minute comments or anything like that? We really love having you guys.
Listen to your advisors.
Make appointments with your advisors.
Yes, they know what they're talking about. We go to the same meetings together.
Oh, we love you guys. It's so wonderful. You will be invited next year also. Maybe you'll be in person. Fly into Arizona, enjoy our weather. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Students, will see you at the next breakout, Gaining Rural Experience, with a panel of summer programs and students who've done some really cool things in a rural health setting. Thank you very much.